Peggy 16.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Battlefield Bootcamp. Once again I'm joined by resident expert Toby Connolly, and today we're going to be discussing how to be an effective engineer on the battlefield. Now Toby, it just so happens the engineer is your favourite class.
It is, yeah. I feel really comfortable using most of the weapons, the assault rifles and the RPGs and the SMAWs, and I really like blowing stuff up.
So what is your personal favourite setup as the engineer?
Personal favourite, it's a tough call, but I'd have to go for rifle M4A1 with foregrip and heavy barrel. It's just a really nice balanced gun, seems to pack a punch, and it's just easy to use for me. I'd run with a SMAW, a repair tool, and the squad explosives specialisation as well, which gives me more rockets for the SMAWs and gives everybody else in my squad the same as well.
So do you always use this personal favourite setup, or do you find different maps call for different setups?
Sometimes different maps will need a different kind of setup. For example, something like Caspian Border, if the enemy air, like helicopters and jets, are doing real damage, I'll switch out the SMAW for a Stinger. On Firestorm, I might switch out the SMAW for a Javelin. Or sometimes on some of the more close quarters maps, I might switch out the rifle for something maybe like a shotgun.
Is there anything else in the engineer's toolkit that we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah, we've got mines and the EOD bot. Now the EOD bot can really come in handy on some close games of Rush, where for whatever reason you just can't get that MCOM armed, and you can sneak the EOD bot right up to the bomb. People won't even notice it's there, arm the bomb, and there you go. And you've got the anti-tank mines, which you can litter all over the battlefield, and they'll stay there for the duration of the game until someone either runs over them in a tank or a jeep, or they're spotted and they're blown up.
So let's talk specifically about taking out vehicles. What tips have you got for us? So
the SMAW and the RPG are the bread and butter of the class, shall we say, and they're the most effective, if not the best, at taking out tanks, jeeps and even helicopters if you're very lucky. What I like to do is if I spot a tank or a tank spotted on the map, I'll make my way over to it and immediately try and get to the back of it. The armour of the tank is the weakest on the back, and one good hit with an RPG will disable it, no problem at all.
In an ideal situation you would end up behind the tank, but say you do have to attack it from the front or the side, what can you expect?
Well, you really are making life a bit more difficult for yourself. It will take anything up to 6 RPGs, good solid hits on the side or the front to disable and destroy. So best to go to the back. Absolutely,
but myself I have found if you can ping a tank with a rocket, it can sometimes make them retreat because they're a bit worried they will get destroyed.
Absolutely, you can certainly buy yourself more time or your team more time just by sending one down range and hitting it at the front, just to make them back off a little bit from the objective.
Going back to the anti-tank mines, leaving them in the open won't make them very effective and they'll probably get blown up quite quickly. What do you suggest to do to make them most effective?
Yeah, you do see a lot where people put them in nice pretty patterns or on straight lines in the middle of the road. Not ideal. People will spot them and they'll get taken out very easily, not earning you any points. What I like to do with mines is to put them just off to the side of the roads, put them in cover next to rubble. If there's a broken building, you put them close as you can to other bits in the environment so they can be disguised. It's as simple as that, and then people will eventually hit them.
As you mentioned earlier, some maps such as Caspian Border do feature quite a lot of aircraft, and you mentioned that the Stinger is the best way to take them down, but how should an engineer use the Stinger?
Okay, well the first thing you need to do is have a look in the sky and watch the enemy aircraft for just a minute or so, not too long. What you're looking for is for them to either pop the flares or use the ECM jammers. Now this will be quite obvious to you. The flares, big white things will be falling to the sky. The ECM jammer looks like a big thick grey cloud. Once you've seen those, that's when you need to pull out the Stinger and start tracking that aircraft. So really you want to catch them in the middle of reloading their countermeasures. That way you've got a much greater chance of scoring the kill or at least scoring the vehicle destroyed.
I mean, one thing I like to do is actually put pressure on the aircraft by locking onto them but not firing to force the countermeasure.
Absolutely.
And then firing it. Of course this does take a bit longer, but it is an alternative to those engineers.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a perfectly valid method as well. If you've got a couple of people working together in the squad, one forcing the people to deploy the countermeasures and the other one firing the Stinger straight after, it's a very, very effective way of scoring the kill and getting those aircraft out of the sky.
So we've talked about destroying the opposing team's vehicles. How can the engineer support his own teams?
So this is where the engineer class really comes into its own. Now firstly, as an engineer you should be moving around with your own team's vehicles anyway to offer support, but you can actually be an extra gun against the enemy. So if you are in a tank or in a jeep, then you just simply jump out, pull out the RPG or the SMAW and send an extra round at that enemy tank. However, getting out of the tank can often lead to an untimely death for yourself. The safest way to do that is to point the barrel of the gun in a direction away from the enemy and then press the B button to get out. That will dictate on what side of the tank you get out.
So we now know how to blow up vehicles. How do we stop our own ones from going the same way?
Okay, like I said, you should be really travelling around with your team. offering support. Now, as soon as you see a vehicle, be it a tank or a jeep or anything like that, kind of get into contact with the enemy, you should really be there behind it or in the safe direction, obviously the opposite side to where the enemy is shooting from, with your repair tool out, getting ready to fix. As soon as it's damaged, start putting the blowtorch on it and you'll start getting the points.
And what about if you're in a helicopter?
The passenger helicopters like the Z11 and the Huey, if you sit in the back of those, you can pull out your repair tool, angle it so you're facing toward the front of the helicopter and you can fix from the inside. So even rockets won't be able to take down the helis then.
So the repair tool doesn't only heal your vehicles, you can have a bit of fun with it and damage vehicles, and in some cases people too.
Yeah, absolutely. It will wreck a tank as quick as you can fix one, and it is the perfect satisfying kill if you ever see a lone sniper up in the hills.
Have you ever been on the wrong end of a blowtorch?
Sadly yes, several times.
Right, well on that note we're out of time, so thank you for joining us Toby. What are we looking at next?
Next time I thought we'd take a look at hints and tips for flying jets.
Excellent. Well, for more Battlefield free tips, join us next time on Battlefield Bootcamp.